Before I begin, the goal of this video is not to dismiss the concept of sequels, but rather explore the idea of what a sequel is and the general perception surrounding them. I think it's fair to say we are living in an age where across all mediums, artists getting to tell original stories on a big stage is becoming quite a rarity, with most of the good ones being relegated to small scale indie projects or the ones that we do end up getting being works that are highly filtered through the safety nets of what a producer might think should be allowed. Thus, for the most part, those original board visions have been replaced with sequels and shared universes. And this video isn't me going on a rant about that, though it could be a topic for a future video, but rather applying a critical lens to that phenomena. It's not hard to see why sequels are in high demand. People are becoming more and more nostalgic as each year passes by, finding comfort in familiarity and longing for a time one never experienced. For it's easy to romanticize about past, thus revisiting a world you are already attached to feels right at home, which is of course what the companies are betting on. But it's fair to say most of these projects end up being lazy cash grabs that solely exist through that original familiarity, which is what I want to focus on. To me, a good sequel is a work that takes the original concepts of a previous story and adds to it in a significant way that warrants its existence. There needs to be some connection, and by that I don't mean plot relevance, but rather thematic connections. Because a good sequel is first and foremost an interesting work that can stand on its own two legs and shouldn't require any previous viewing or other media. Let me elaborate on that by using my two favorite live action Batman films for examples. First, Batman Returns, the 1992 follow up to Batman, and a huge cultural event. This film, however, was significantly darker and quite divisive at the time, to an extent that Tim Burton had left the franchise, but throughout the years it has garnered a more favorable status and is quite highly regarded, the second being the 2022 reboot by Matt Reeves. Both Batman Returns and The Batman are great films where we follow Batman in this fantastical Gotham filled with mysteries and interesting supporting cast and their distinctive tone and vision of Batman. What makes these two films so interesting and crucial examples here is first that you don't need to watch the 1989 Batman or know anything about him for that matter to understand Batman Returns. It simultaneously works as a sequel and a standalone project. Yes, you will not understand Batman's origin or who he is, but that's a flawed argument because first, it's not crucial to the narrative of that film. And secondly, I don't think it's that hard to get a general idea of Batman through strictly judging the events of the film, as you're building your own interpretation of Batman through this specific narrative. And isn't that the beauty of films? Imagine for a second that this was an introduction to Batman. To me, instead of taking anything away from the film, it would arguably make it an even more mystifying experience than it already is. You have a city with this creature walking around during Christmas with an army of penguins, a bat-like creature roaming the city, and cat people. It's such a unique world on its own, drawn with different clashing visions melding with each other, that makes for a fascinating experience in a vacuum. Now, of course, I'm not saying the first film isn't good or that you don't need to watch it, but that it can also be a solid standalone feature, and its narrative isn't dependent on anything else for it to work. Similarly, 2022's The Batman is essentially a sequel to a work that doesn't exist, which kinda supports my above point. Sure, you can say that everyone is familiar with Batman at this point, but to that, I would say no, they are not. At least not to this version of Batman. And trust me, there will still be many people who would have watched this film with absolutely no idea about Batman and still find enjoyment out of it. We don't need the origin of this character because that is not essential to the narrative at hand. You can view it through the lens of your pre-existing knowledge of Batman for sure, but you can also view it as this mysterious, stoic, slightly unhinged figure as the film slowly peels its layer, as you immerse yourself in this gritty, neon-dripped night of Gotham City, a city filled with broken characters trying to see the light or find an escape in their own ways. Any good film at the end of the day exists in a world that has a history and a possible future. And any good film would have a rich world for us to be a part of. Whether that world has been expanded upon anywhere else doesn't impact the experience of that film any less. For watching a film is a voyeuristic experience of observing different characters for a certain amount of time through the lens of the director, and every single moment you spend with a character should have enough depth and a life that exists beyond the runtime of the film. And to me, this isn't anything different from that. Thus, the original Batman film is just one of the many incidents that happened in the universe of Batman Returns that we got to see, and it existing is the cherry on top rather than essential viewing. Compare that to a film like Avengers Endgame, which is basically a big budget TV finale instead of a film. The same expectations can't be applied here because it only works through your love for the franchisee, and the narrative is held together by the events happened before and could be better enjoyed if you view it as a TV show, which it is not. The reason I bring this up is not to critique MCU, but to highlight the difference between a good and a bad sequel, regardless of how you feel, because at the end of the day, the medium of film is not supposed to be serialized. It can work for some people for sure, but to me this is the line where I separate a good sequel from a bad one, and often the latter is unfortunately the more visible, because treating films like episodes of this big budget cinematic TV show supposedly seems much more likely to bring in money, at least in the eyes of the producers. I also think there needs to be a distinction made between a serialized work and a film, which is very important. What differentiates the two styles of storytelling is very simple. One is a serialized work that tells its stories across multiple characters or episodes, a la a TV series or a comic book. These stories are designed to be told in separate parts that all tie together to form a larger narrative. Films, on the other hand, as I mentioned previously, are like a gateway to a different world for a brief moment that lasts till the end of the runtime. Here you get to spend time with the characters and follow them, observe the world as you try to make sense of the narrative at hand as your time in the world comes to an end. Now, how this differs from a serialized work, to put it simply, is that narrative has a start and an end. In a serialized work, the narrative doesn't conclude at the end of an episode, but whenever the final episode drops. Thus, each episode is designed to support each other, whether directly or indirectly. One should also not mistake seasons for sequels. Or sequels would rather be something like the upcoming Gundam anime, which is this behemoth of a franchisee told across multiple timelines through multiple entries, and most of them are designed to be friendly to new viewers, where seasons are part of the same narrative. Last year's Baldur's Gate 3 is another great example. In fact, gaming actually does this the best because most studios can't realistically expect the players to have played, say, every Final Fantasy game to buy the new one, and even the ones that are connected, like the Yakuza franchise, can be enjoyed as standalone projects, even if your completionist brain might tell you otherwise, which it does. But point being, they are designed to be friendly to new viewers for the most part. Now, of course, that said, not everything falls under this, and with gaming, it can be trickier since how unique it is from other mediums, and the line can often get blurry due to their more flexible nature. Thus, I feel more comfortable making the distinction in films and TV shows more than gaming at the moment. Going back to the title of this video though, I guess what I was trying to say throughout all this is this idea and expectations that most people have from what a sequel is or should be, and this fixation on a direct continuation of a story, because you're essentially designing a TV show at that point. I love world building, it's one of my favorite aspects of media, and what appeals to me about the concept is getting to explore the world more and expand upon it, while showing different sides of that world, where the events, the characters can implicitly be connected. Krzysztof Kieslowski's Three Colors trilogy is perhaps the best example of this, where all three films exist in the same world and are connected thematically, but each film is vastly different from each other while still being part of the same world, with different protagonists and tones that form a larger story together and are just some of the best films you can experience that speaks to different conflicts and ideas. As I come to the end of this video, while going through these concepts, one thing that quite fascinated me is how your perception of media can be shaped by the order you experience them, and in some rare cases can result in completely unique perspectives just by changing that order. Something like the Haruhi anime comes to mind, which was released out of order in 2006, with a short film that the crew made being the first introduction to a wide group of people to Haruhi. It was such an insane move and something that I have so much respect for, because outside being just one of the funniest pieces of anime, it also gave Haruhi another added layer by just reordering the events. But the reason it worked so well is also because how strong those episodes were to begin with, where you could totally buy that it was an intentional decision. I feel like that's a good place to end. Whenever I come across a behemoth of a franchise at this point, instead of going from the very beginning, I feel like it would be quite fun sometime to just throw myself in between and see how that experience feels like and work my way from up there. But yeah, thanks for watching. Until next time.